I'm not a communist, so I think that like I can't even imagine what that would look like in general. But the way I explain it is like I'm not opposed to it, you know.
Are are you kidding me? I guess he's not. He's more like he's more just like an Islamic fundamentalist now. But wait, what?
Oh, what the?
What?
What the hell?
Oh my god, bro! There's no way. That's hilarious.
This is a joke, right?
Yo,
No,
what's what's going on, brother?
I
Hasan,
literally scroll it. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bro, that's
Okay.
kind of crazy.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Hasan.
Just watching us like talk about like random drama.
Rolling on my TikTok For You page. I'm sitting here laying down with Kaya, and right as I'm scrolling, I hear this Dean being like, "Yo, I saw the content nuke. I watched the content nuke, and Hasan was my entry point into like doing content on the left." What's up, guys?
Yeah. What's going on,
good.
man? I was kind of like talking
my
about
God.
how I think that you've done a lot of really good things for people on the left, but I watched like the start of that content nuke. I'm gonna be honest. Like I was like, what the? I was like, I saw like a lot of bad things in there, and I'm trying to be objective as possible.
I have to this day not watched the full nuke. I will admit, I only watched a couple pieces of it. Hold on, I'm cracking this in. I actually just watched a couple pieces of it this today on stream, and from what I saw, it was just the same that the sex pestity community is clipped out of context. Stuff like saying that I deny rapes on October 7, and it's literally like a 2-second clip, and it's literally me in the fuller context actually arguing with a chatter who said, "How can you claim that rapes could have happened on October 7?" And I'm saying like, no, sexual violence has a tendency to occur in moments like this. So, like, I'm not going to immediately dismiss claims of sexual violence happening on October 7. And they clip the part where I say, even if sexual violence did happen, that doesn't change the dynamic of genocide for me at all. I think it's like completely inappropriate to say that it's
The walkback is so horrible. Like, he would constantly say that, like, we've got the one credible one, which is from the person who was in captivity, but basically never really lend any oxygen to anything else. Like, what? Why is he doing? Oh God! But now he's like, yeah, they happened. I just don't think it was ordered. Which again is not really the claim that most people make. Most people make that it was a pattern. There was a pattern of similar behavior in multiple locations in a short space of time. You will never hear him address that particular assessment of it, even though that's what the UN report said. That's what most people seem to agree on.
That genocide is permissible because sexual violence occurred. And they clip the part where I say, even if sexual or rape doesn't change the dynamic for me about what's going on at all, to make it seem like I'm saying one.
People say there was systemic. Is a pattern of behavior, not systemic. Whatever. I'm not engaged.
No rapes happen. And two, that I don't care if rapes happen. It's stuff like that. It's riddled with things like that. And claiming that I'm calling like all Jews inbred or whatever, and I'm talking about specifically the terrorist group.
Systemic means ordered, doesn't it? Oh, you're not a leftist. Okay, you watch this leftist streamer all the time, and you're a shit leftist. I'm a better leftist than you are. Systemic does not mean ordered, you idiot. What is systemic racism? The first thing when right-wingers are like, where's the racist law? You say, no, you don't need a written law for systemic racism to occur. No one needs to tell anyone to be racist. No one needs to be openly, explicitly racist for systemic racism to occur. Systemic racism is what happens when internal biases are widespread enough and when behaviors are widespread enough and tucked away without anyone telling anyone to do it, without it being written down anywhere, that it still results in a negative impact against people because of their racial background, ergo systemic racism, as opposed to legal racism or like on the books racism. There you go, though. You're welcome. That's some free, actual left-wing commentary that you can't seem to get from other streamers. Sorry that happened to you.
The JDL terrorist group destroying aid that was going into Gaza. And then I described the context of the situation where I'm like, this is like, if I look at the longer clip from that same time frame, and it's like 30 seconds prior, I'm literally describing like, this is a right-wing settler terrorist group comprised of a bunch of inbred psychos that are going in to destroy aid going into Gaza. And then he cuts that part to be like, oh, he's calling all Jewish people inbred. It's stuff like that for the most
Is
part.
he also going to gloss over what he did with the rapes? Is he also going to gloss over the fact that he basically bought every single word of that Intercept article when the whole purpose of the Intercept article was to discredit every single witness statement on sexual violence with very stupid objections? I love this. This is narrative control. He's just desperately asserting narrative control.
That's basic stuff. If you say anything even remotely pro-Palestinian, you're going to get attacked that way all the time on the internet. I'm sure you guys live stream a lot, so I'm sure you're very familiar with the ways in which sometimes people clip you out of context. But the thing I took offense to, for the most part, was like the liberal Zionist Hasbara that took place, where he said a bunch of like incredibly ahistorical claims, like that were, I think, very insensitive and also demonstrably untrue. Saying that 1 million Jews were displaced from the surrounding Arab regions, like expelled.
You're saying every female hostage came out alive? Are you a liar? No, some female hostages were killed, you stupid. The 6 hostages who were found, shot. Wow.
Forcibly. And he called the Nakba like the War of Independence.
One alleges rape. Okay. And do you think they didn't happen when the UN says that there were at least 3 locations where there's good witness, where there's credible witness statements of rapes on October 7th? Do you think that's a lie or no? Do you think the witnesses lied? The ones that the UN said were credible? 3 locations? Pattern of behavior? By separate units? Yes or no? Macaroni nationalist. Macaroni nationalist. No pattern. Oh, so you disagree with the UN report. Okay, so you're a liar. Yeah, you're a scheming little cunt. Yeah, let's go. Get him out.
Or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what he said.
Let's go back here.
Very insensitive and also demonstrably untrue, saying that 1 million Jews were displaced from the surrounding Arab regions, like expelled forcibly. And he called the Nakba like the War of Independence or something along those lines. I can't.
Oh God, he's such a. Let's see what he actually said.
Is it really insane to think that Jews, as an ethnic minority in Israel, would not be safe? After all, Israel is a country of refugees. If the Jews didn't come from Europe after the they came from the surrounding Arab countries that expelled them in massive amounts following the 1948 war. In
If you want
fact,
to be more precise, you would say they were pushed out, not expelled. Is that it? But if you want to make that argument, then you would also suggest that it was a lot less than 750,000 that were directly expelled as well in the Nakba. But I don't know why you would bother with that semantic disagreement. Okay.
there was more Jews displaced than Palestinians
Displaced.
during the Nakba.
Okay.
1 million Jews. All of these surrounding Arab countries had vibrant
Oh, it wasn't. Oh, it's 1 million if you count the ones who were pushed out from, say, like including the '67 war or the Suez Canal crisis or the Yom Kippur war, because usually after Israel wins a war, then Jews in the Middle East suffer and then get pushed. Yeah, push and pull dynamics. There's a lot more push than pull, but yeah, I guess the pull is that there's somewhere to go that might be safer. That's the pull, I guess, because they didn't usually have that. If you were an Iraqi Jew in 1940, you weren't really sure where you could go that would be safe, right? But once Israel's founded and once Israel is declares independence, then you're like, okay, there actually is a place that we might be able to go to where this doesn't happen to us.
Jewish communities in huge number, hundreds of thousands. Now, if you look at them, you're looking at close to, if not literally, 0 Jews left in these countries.
Just to give you an idea, here's a visual representation of the Jewish refugees after 1948. Morocco had 265,000.
And he's just saying he called it the War of Independence. No, he also called it the Nakba. What? It was a war in which Israel gained their independence, which is true. And he also describes it as the Nakba. It's not like he's denying.
I can't remember exactly what
He's such a snaky little cunt, man. Oh God.
he said. And no, the Nakba was, the forcible expulsion of 750,000 Palestinians from their ancestral homelands from 1947 to 1949. And according to Israeli historian Ilan Pape, this is very well documented. It was Plandalit. It was a well documented
He's
ethnic
going to completely mischaracterize Plan Dalit, but okay.
cleansing operation. So it's pretty basic information about the history of Palestine and Israel. So I didn't necessarily care about all the other.
I mean, which part of that does Ethan disagree with? Which part of that does Ethan disagree with? What? Okay.
Being like, oh, he loves terrorism. Like he there's a moment where he talks about like Hamas and Hezbollah, and he makes it seem as though these resistance groups just kind of exist in the ether. Like they just kind of existed historically throughout the inception of the nation state of Israel, when both of these are different forms of Palestinian resistance that has evolved throughout time and increasingly become more violent, and violent in ways that I, of course, disagree with as well. But, you know, it's...
what did he say there? Hang on, I'm just losing my...
Groups just kind of exist. Like there's a moment where he's being like, oh, Israel. So I didn't necessarily care about all the other him being like, oh, he loves terrorism. Like there's a moment where he talks about like Hamas and Hezbollah, and he makes it seem as though these resistance groups just kind of exist in the ether. Like they just kind of existed historically throughout the inception of the nation state of Israel, when both of these are different forms of Palestinian resistance that has evolved throughout time and increasingly become more violent, and violent in ways that I, of course, disagree with as well. But, you know, it's anytime I talk about their tactics, or anytime I offer context to how, like, even Hamas itself has evolved throughout history, starting as a Muslim Brotherhood cutout that was a Islamic charity initially, one that actually Israel supported as well, specifically to undermine the secular resistance groups like the PFLP, DFLP, the PLO in its entirety, because they thought that the Islamist fundamentals...
I'm offering context for resistance activity, by the way. This is in the content
news. Jews.
Where is it? With the Houthi operation. This is in providing context.
Guys, let's just use our...
Off.
There's a ship through here.
Put these Houthis on Broadway.
Well, they go, listen, you want to bring a ship through here? We're going to take it. So that's exactly what the Houthis start doing. They start sending in helicopters onto ships. Bro, they... Look at this. They got the Palestinian flag that they painted under the helicopter with the Yemen flag. They overtake... They start overtaking the ships, and they're like, guess what, dog? No more trade to Israel. If you are sending
going to Israel
ships into Israel, if you are owned by an Israeli subsidiary, if you're owned by an Israeli corporation, we're going to take over your ship. You cannot use this trade route anymore. Guess what, bitch? It's our territorial boundary.
It's not their territorial boundary. It's international waters. The Houthis aren't even a recognized government. It's not even the Yemeni government's international water. It's not even...
And we're going to enforce this until... you stop doing genocide in Gaza.
So it's owned by an Israeli. Do you understand how trade works? It was going from Turkey to India. Turkey to India. Are they just collateral damage? And is all the third world countries that got affected by this as well? Are they collateral too?
Let's review his claims. His first claim is that the boat is headed for Israel. It's not. It's going from Turkey to India. Next claim is that it's owned by an Israeli company. It's not. It's being chartered by a Japanese company, and the boat's owners are registered in the Isle of Man. I'd like to remind everybody that the crew that's
that's a lot of degrees of separation from IDF money, isn't it?
Kidnapped in this or anything.
That lines up with leftist,
which is also a lie. And honestly, at this point,
this is like a hostile. They're streaming this? Yeah, they're flexing. What?
And they're coming in hot with guns.
Yeah, but you have to understand, this is a deterrence. Israeli society is going to start getting upset. They're going to be like, I can't get my treats. I can't get my Amazon Prime deliveries. What the is going on? I hate this. Israel sucks. I'm leaving Israel. That's the goal.
I find it disturbing that Hasan thinks...
Is that the goal? You're just providing context. Get Israelis to leave the country. Yeah. Why? Again? I thought we were a one-stater here, buddy. I thought we were a one-stater. That's all. It's all Israeli treats, not the fact that this disrupted the economy for pretty much everyone. That poor people suffered for this.
That a slowdown of imports is going to cause Jews to flee Israel. 80% of
Israel, that's the goal.
Jewish heritage, and this is despite the fact...
Wild.
So these guys did all of this, right? They did all of this.
Is that their helicopter?
More context.
Yeah. That looks like a legit helicopter.
It is a legit helicopter.
This is wild.
So they take it over, and they tell the people in the ship, usually like mostly Filipino people, Filipino crews,
Oh.
And they're like, all right, well, you know, we got no problems with you, you know, but you're coming with us. We're taking over the
My favorite. Yeah, that's exactly what they said. We got no problems with you. We're all right. Whilst I point a gun at your abdomen and take you hostage for over a year against your will. No problem with you. The fuck? Why is he doing this? Why is he editorializing on behalf of people who are kidnapping civilians? Why is he doing that? Just providing context, bro.
Fundamentalists would never garner any sort of positive Western support, making it seem as though these are just like groups that are entirely motivated by anti-Semitism and not developed through the process of 75 years of occupation, death, and destruction. It's all things like that I consider to be ahistorical. I mean, not that I consider it's just ahistorical and completely devoid of nuance. And I think it serves the purpose of defending Israel from a more progressive standpoint. It's not something I'm unfamiliar with. I've heard it a million times over. It's not like as egregious as being like, oh, I hope your beeper is, on notice or whatever. Like, I hope Israel kills you. It's not like that. But it's another way to, I guess, tackle the issue while consistently presenting Palestinians as like anti-Semitic terrorists across the board while saying you're pro-Palestinian.
Yeah, I'll say this. So I'm also pro-Palestinian.
Yeah. Is that what he said? Has he ever said that if you support Palestinian state, you're anti-Semitic across the board? Or are we talking Hamas is and the Hezbollah are and the Houthis are? Okay. Oh, he's so manipulative, man. It's like, this is literally, this is what people do in school, right? You know, if you're two kids are fighting in school, so the one guy goes to the friend group of the other guy and is like, listen, let me tell you what's what about little Stewie over here. He's bad news, okay? He's a bit of a pedo. Like, what the? Why is he doing this? It's so catty.
And
I mean, these guys are clever. They're young, but they seem pretty clever. So I don't know. But most people also just don't know shit about the Middle East, so they probably are quite easy to manipulate like this.
You're on TikTok. You're a Zoomer.
You are infinitely like more educated and invested in Israel and Palestine than I am. I'm more I understand the basics and I just very vehemently disagree with ethnic cleansing, genocide, and unwarranted human death. That's as far as my stance goes.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm pro-Palestine. But I will say, like, I've had conversations with, Zionists and individuals that are pro-Israeli on live. And, next thing you know, just because I don't necessarily support the existence of an ethno-state that wants to eradicate the existence of surrounding Arabs and Arab nations,
because Ethan should not be able to lie freely about Hasan, such as the lie that he denies our words on October 7th, which you have no problem with Ethan doing that. Tofu, you know what you're doing right now? You're basically doing the same shit as like calling someone a denier, and then they hit back and be like, why would you call me that? I didn't say Jews didn't die in the I just think it wasn't civilian. You're literally doing the exact same defense. Hasan downplays, which is the same as a form of revisionism or denial of the official and recognized narrative, which comes from the UN, right? Okay. That's downplays the scale of what happened, given that it was in such a small space of time, the fact there was a pattern of behavior, which you guys don't ever acknowledge across multiple locations, verified by multiple reliable witnesses, and that the UN accepts as verifiable, reliable witnesses, then yes, I'm going to call him a denier. Yes.
Like, oh, all of a sudden I hate all Jewish people. Or because I think that Zionism is bad because it's predicated on,
Oh my God, people are making second accounts. You guys are so horrible. Go away. No.
colonialism and imperialism.
But you can go as well. Okay, bye-bye.
All of a sudden it's anti-Semitic. So I understand how, one could posture a pro-Palestinian view to be anti-Semitic to kind of just diminish the value and support of a human cause.
Yeah.
But I don't know the specifics and the intricacies at all. But I want to learn more, and I want to learn more about you. I do. I really do.
Catch them while they're young. Yes. What's the clip? Here, I got the context.
Of reality.
You're describing the reason why so many people simultaneously consider me to be a Democratic Party mouthpiece or a suck dem or whatever but also a threat to America as well, because I do.
Because you're an inconsistent, shape-shifting snake who mangles and molds their positions based on which crowd you're trying to gain clout from in any given moment. Yeah, I know.
Two, just like you said, I do advocate for social democratic reforms. And I do think that in order to develop any kind of mechanism of pushback, a robust labor force that has any kind of, speaking power, any kind of fighting power to strike at the heart of the imperial core where value is generated, I think that in the short term, in order to combat against that, you have to advocate for a much lighter form of propaganda. Despite, I perfectly understand that social democracies benefit tremendously from American imperialism, Western imperialism, and would not exist in the way that they do without such atrocities committed, right? But, if you want America in the way that I feel about it, and if you want America to get out of the way for places with more revolutionary potential to do what they would normally do, I think that, one thing you have to do is advocate for a lighter form while simultaneously still doing agitated propaganda that goes beyond, social democratic ideas.
I just wanted to put emphasis on the exact point of the so-called radicalization funnel where, for example, Hasan and JT catch them while they're young, as they say, and then they start looking into this new idea, etc., and then move forwards through the funnel, get more and more informed, get more and more radicalized, and so on, can only work and can absolutely utilize, for example, the
Catch them while they're young. Oh, it's so creepy.
stuff that Hasan does, because Hasan does one very particular thing that social democrats that, for example, we would never call to this podcast or we would give a lot of to, because they cut the funnel from both sides. What do I mean by this? They introduce people to lukewarm socialist ideas, etc., and then they want to keep them there, right? Well, whenever Hasan introduces people to socialist ideas, yes, the lukewarm, not so scary sounding ones, keeping your power levels low, hidden, and so on and so on. He does not stop them from progressing through the funnel and getting additional information and so on. He doesn't agitate against, for example, the revolutionary perspective and so on and so on. That is the main difference.
I want to finish that content, Nuke. I want to get your takes. You said you reacted to it on stream. I'll probably do that.
No, I to be fair, I didn't react to the thing in its entirety. And I might in the future, because I was thinking about maybe bringing in some historians to also talk about it regardless. Because at the end of the day, it is.
We're definitely going to get that. What's his name? Zachary Foster or some shit. He's going to get someone like that to come in and talk about how the Jewish exodus actually just happened because the Mossad blew up synagogues. And that's actually why 800,000 people across the Middle East and North Africa left their homes. Oh no!
I mean, it's important to address a lot of the false claims being made. Not necessarily about me being pro-terror or whatever. That I hear that all the fucking time. That doesn't mean anything. Congressman Richie Torres wrote a letter to Twitch back in the day, I think a week before his election. He was on the ballot, demanding that I get banned because I was the arch pro-terrorist supporter. Richie Torres, of course, is a massive Israel advocate from one of the poorest districts in the country, and spends most of his time talking about Israel instead of his own constituents. But I get attacked by the ADL and stuff like that. All that stuff is ultimately meaningless. But I do care about the history of it, and I want to make sure that people are not misinformed about how things have taken place.
Make sure they know about that Dare You Scene throw your son in the oven story. Everyone loves that one, Hasan.
Because I think that's what matters. The truth matters more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I can obviously respect the prerogative of valuing truth over all else.
Yeah.
And I hold the same perspective. And I'm sure that there's maybe a handful of people watching that are like, "Oh my God, Dean, you're sucking up to Hasan, and you're not."
Oh, no,
you're not
you guys are.
Yeah,
you guys are the arch debate lords. You can take me to task on this issue if you want.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of your content.
I'll call you out, okay? And I mean that, I will.
Eat them while they're crispy. Jeez. Jesse, thanks for the $5 Canadian. For a goal, as Zoomers age, do you think they'll retain their super anti-Israel stance? If so, do you think that'll lead to geopolitical shift? Nah, I don't know. I think if you're like a progressive and if you are young, you're probably going to always lean towards Palestine, mostly because they've got better aesthetics, better propaganda, and even the reality on the ground in a lot of ways. Just like you do actually need to learn quite a bit to get the Israeli, like even close to the Israeli position. It doesn't help that their government's mental, right? Their government is insane. And at least with Hamas, they're insane as well, but they get to be the underdog, right? With Netanyahu and shit like that, they're just insane and also winning militarily. So yeah, if you're a youth, of course you're going to lean towards the Palestine angle more than the Israeli one. If you're going off of like
Bronx is one of the
instinct.
poorest districts in the US. That's cute.
Whoa, thanks for the 1999, the devil. I really appreciate that. I don't know why it's cute, but thank you.
I will. I see some fuck shit, I'll do it.
Let me tell you guys something, by the way. As someone who has also debated and still every now and then engages in debate, I will say as a content creator who's been doing this for a very long time, I love what you guys are doing. I will urge you to, consistently end up debating and stuff, but like, I warn against the toxicity that might create for you. And it's good to diversify. It's good to diversify your content in general, and like do React content, more fun stuff, things of that nature, more educational content, because there are a lot of people who enjoy the blood sport of it all, but they don't necessarily care about the truth. They just want to see dunks. And
sorry, Hasan, my bad. Don't mean to interrupt you, bro. Dean Harry's in the box.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead and continue.
My bad.
The what?
Yeah.
The what?
So basically, what I'm saying is like, as someone who did a lot of debate initially, I think that I noticed at least like there's a point where it turns into you basically cultivate a community. I warn against this. You basically cultivate a community of people that just like want slam dunks.
That's you guys.
And it does become a little toxic in my experience. Maybe you guys are avoiding that. I don't know how it works on TikTok in general, but I would definitely diversify my content if I were in your shoes.
Well, I agree with you, and I can even expand on that. So apart from the cultivation of this niche that becomes toxic at a point because pro slam dunks, I even like find myself falling into that sometimes. Sometimes somebody will just be pissing me off so much that I'm no longer focused on trying to inform and educate, and I'd just rather slam dunk because they're really upsetting me. But then also, kind of like toxicity that it can cultivate outside of like a toxic content creation environment and consumption environment is, God, dude, it does a lot to your mental well-being to just debate people for 4 hours a day. So I'm starting to expand outwards, and hopefully I'll soon be able to get to a point where I'm doing other content apart from debates. It's actually funny because
Hasan's social skills are so bad. They're like late night calls with friends, and he rambles about something they don't know about, and then gives them unsolicited advice. Yeah, but he can get away with it, right? Because he's got the clout, and they like it. Yeah.
And the way you do your content, kind of like doing debates with some reactionary content and other related forms of political information and education-esque content, actually came up in a conversation I was having with somebody that's kind of been helping me. They're like, well, look at Hasan, he's doing it perfect. He does debates and reactionary content, and that seems like a much better way to live your life.
Well, for me, like I have an ideological purpose, and it's not something that I hide. I've even openly admitted to. I call myself a propagandist on Piers Morgan's show, which everyone always points to. What do you mean you're a propagandist? Like I don't like, I use propaganda in the old terminology for it. I had a show on the Young Turks back in the day called agitative propaganda as well, where my goal is to try to instill class consciousness in the American working class, because I feel like that is what's most lacking from our political discourse in general. So like I have an ideological goal. I want Americans to recognize that it's not your neighbors that are.
Why are you watching this Glaze Fest? Apparently they talk about Hasan's ideology. I feel like these guys, they're not even really kids. They're 20 somethings, right? They're smart enough to see through quite a bit of what he's doing. because I think they talk about economics later on, and yeah, just want to see how it goes.
You over. It's not undocumented migrants. It's not trans people. It's not DEI. And these things are simply purposeful distractions that reactionary forces utilize while they rob you blind with austerity and an overall refusal to improve your material conditions, whether that is the Republican Party in many circumstances, or even in other instances, the Democratic Party that refuses to push the needle in the direction of necessary change. So for that purpose, I'm saying I realized that like simply doing debates alone was not cutting it, because I wanted people to, I wanted to create a community that was engaged, listening, learning, and also seeking out information on their own. But more importantly, that they were also engaging in activism, organizing, whether that be community organizing or labor organizing, and
or Reddit organizing. Oh God. Bro, his chat are just like some of the most rabid dogs. These guys are not doing anything. They just accuse everyone of being a baby killer. That's all. Like, and there's so many of them. Every time I've watched a Hasan stream, whenever even when Hasan used to be okay with me and when he would watch my content, like the chat was just ballistic. They were so unreasonable. You think these guys are out here with a thirst for knowledge, like learning and organizing? What the?
I mean, I have a lot of obviously local officials in my chat at any given moment, or even people that apparently work at the DNC, which was shocking to me when I went there, but and of course many labor union organizers and activists in general. So that's what I mean when I say debates are great for content. It's good for slam dunks. It has an educational value for sure. You get to understand the opposition's position. You get to teach people what the talking points are, what their talking points are, and how to effectively counter them. And I think the takeaway for many in your audience will be how to effectively dismantle those propaganda points and the arguments that your grandparents or your parents might be making or your coworkers are making. But beyond that, I think in order for people to unlock their true potential and be able to bring about real progressive change and create systems.
Man, like when I went on the H3 podcast, I was really worried about coming off a bit too like boring or whatever. But like I think I did pretty okay at making sure that every statement I was giving in response to each question was like there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there's a purpose of phrasing it in that way so that people can get the information in a digestible way. This just feels like stone stream of consciousness. I don't really know what angle he's trying to push here, like what he's getting at.
Of pressure,
like mechanisms of self-glazing freestyle.
Mechanisms of pushback, sometimes pushback that's even warranted towards the Democratic Party. I think that there's more to do. And it'll create a more sustainable career for you as well, in general, for all of you guys.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, at least when it comes to my approach, like I agree, like the left as a whole, or like progressives, and like in general, need a multifaceted approach in terms of like the different content people like go towards. And I also think that like for certain creators, there's going to be certain skill sets that you're going to have where you're going to be able to do a certain set of content very consistently, a lot more if you're interested in it, if you like doing it, and if you can bring the energy every single time. And as it relates to like things like debates, I think that like people like me and Dean, we have a lot more of a pressure and push internally to engage in that particular type of activism and work comparative to other forms, because it comes more naturally to us, or it's some like way we can explain things a little bit more in depth. And one thing I have an issue with in terms of content that's like reaction based or other stuff like that is that there's no back and forth direct sort of response from people. So okay, I think that oftentimes it can create more echo chambers, like naturally, like when you engage in like reaction-based content. So I actually think to myself that like, of course, there's going to be people who are just trying to look for slam dunks in terms of debate type content that's live debates. But I mean, I think that would be true for short form content, reaction-based content, or any other form of content that would exist on social media. And I think actually is alleviated more when we engage in live debates, because it's like more in person, real. You can humanize people more because you're engaging in direct conversation. That's at least how I view it. But like, I think that, yeah, we should engage in other content.
You're absolutely right. I think there's definitely a space for debating for sure. I'm not discounting that at all. I'm just saying that it's good to diversify your content as well. On top of that, for sustainability in general, and also on top of that, to create a broader community that has more interest, because debates do sometimes have a tendency to just like narrow your focus a little too much. That's all I'm saying.
I agree with that.
You guys are doing great. Don't get me wrong. You guys are killing it.
Yeah, I guess the way I look at it.
How has Hasan spent the last entire year talking about debate creators, and as soon as like a couple of them are warm to him, he just completely, oh god, he just completely folds. Like, oh, you guys are doing a great job. Like, what is these guys are debate perverts. Like, these guys both debate and do dunks and bulldoze opponents and logically trap people and make them feel stupid. Like, this is their entire thing, isn't it? And suddenly that's like everything Hasan hates about creators. But I guess because they're there's an olive branch going on there, and there's this new kind of content sphere that he might be able to dip his toes in. There's a new audience that he might be able to snatch a couple of. He's suddenly this invertebrate. His spine is just twisted like a noodle into the debate's actually a really cool position. Yeah, I debate all the time. Wait, how much debating have you done in the last year? Piers Morgan, where you just told that guy, that English guy, like you just mocked his accent and didn't engage with a word that he said. The 16-year-old, the Israeli child, Willie Mack, a drama creator.
Is, like the only reason like I now have this career where I do like debates for 4 hours a day was because like 2.5 years ago I decided to load up TikTok at 3 a.m. and join some random person's live and try to convince them that they were wrong and I was right. And then it just kind of like snowballed into what it is now. And kind of like what Parker said, I think that if we want to build this literal machine to get as many people as possible to be more and more progressive, right, and less bigoted, less on the right, further to the left, it requires a very multifaceted approach with a functioning ecosystem of different people that are doing different things. And like when I've had people come up on my live before and be like, oh, Dean, you suck, you're just a rage baiter, you do reactionary content that does no good. I guess like on one hand, it's like I should do more for interests to society as well as self-interests. But then on the other hand, it's like, I'm good at this, I'm going to focus on what I'm good at. And there's other individuals that will focus on what they're good at. But, hopefully, I mean, if this turns into something long-term, I'll be good at multiple things,
Yeah. Look, I'm dog shit at gaming. I'm dog shit at gaming. I still play video games on stream. I know that it like brings in a different audience as well. In my line of work, I've realized, especially the position that I'm advocating for, is one that either Americans, especially, are either completely oblivious to and have never heard of it, or are inherently antagonistic to. So charitability is the most important thing. And I think like collaborations and people seeing me in a different light and not just simply clips, because that's just the most common way that people learn about other content creators, is the best way forward. But that's just for me. I'm not saying it's for all of you guys as well. I'm just sharing what I've seen through my experience.
Yeah, of course, man. I feel like I've been talking a lot. Does anybody else want to hop in here?
Yeah, who wants to debate me? Harry,
Harry, go ahead.
Hasan, what do I have to say, man?
One time on stream, well, you referenced Harry as like the DNC shill, and then you referenced me as the car guy. So at least Harry gets a name.
Hasan, do you still think I'm a shill?
I don't know. I haven't seen any of your new stuff, so I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, you'd see Harry as a shill. Yeah.
Let me ask you. No, this is important. What do you think about Hakeem Jeffries' performance so far?
Like, you mean as the minority leader just generally past couple of years, or since Trump's gotten into office?
Since Trump's coming in.
Pretty mediocre. Mediocre.
All right. That's good.
I mean, it's been too weak. I don't like how he's not criticized like Eric Adams.
Yeah.
I think that's insane. I know he's like taking the position of, we have to wait and see if the charges are dismissed. I think that's I don't think he's been hard enough on Trump. I really don't like how like Jerry Connolly is leading the Judiciary Committee and not AOC. I think we've been making like some very simple mistakes. So
yeah, okay,
I
that's
recognize
good.
this guy's face, Harry, but I don't know. Maybe he's just got a generic face. I don't know.
That's Hasan, it is possible to be nuanced. Like the moderate Democrats are too moderate, and the progressive Democrats are too progressive, and you could just be somewhere in the middle.
I have a question too.
What's up?
Okay, and this is because I feel like I've been getting more radical in my views on this topic.
Oh, he's a DNC guy. He's been on PR. Okay.
But the main critique that I've seen from your supporters, and I think even you called me way too lived out for this when you were reacting to my Jubilee episode.
I think it was the immigration stuff, maybe.
Immigration policy. Yes, I wanted to ask you about that. So, in accordance with the stance that I either showed on the Jubilee episode, or I could just kind of reiterate my thoughts on immigration now. I'd love for you to tell me why I'm wrong.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, first, I guess, we'll start with border policy. So, border policy, what I want in my best version of the world is as many ports of entry that operate as efficiently and as quickly as possible with screening processes that specifically expel and do not allow people into the country that have committed violent crimes. And then for undocumented migrants that are already in America, for undocumented migrants that have committed violent crimes, to deport them. And for undocumented migrants that have not...
Oh, is this because Hasan kept on dismissing the Langford bill as like the Dems kowtowing to Republican fascism, and they shouldn't have been done, right? And I think Dean was in that Jubilee debate actually kind of defending it because it was very good evidence that Trump couldn't take yes for an answer because he wanted the border to stay as an issue so he could run on it in the election.
Committed violent crimes, to offer them a pathway to residency or citizenship.
Sorry to cut you off. You don't... Oh, okay, so you don't want to deport undocumented migrants that haven't committed crimes, but undocumented migrants that have committed crimes, you want to deport them.
Specifically violent crimes, yeah.
No, specifically
Dean.
Okay. So
I don't disagree with anything that you just said at all. I don't think we're in disagreement in terms of, well, I guess the only thing that I would disagree with is if an undocumented migrant has caused a violent crime, I would want the American court system to handle it and actually imprison that person rather than allowing them to be free. Like, I don't want rapists to get a trip back home. You know what I mean? And then just be like, all right.
You know what? That's a good point. You know, if,
Yeah,
like,
so that's-
so if we would do like the deportation of undocumented migrants that have committed violent crimes,
Yeah.
it'd be conditional given where they're deported would be where they land in a jail cell.
Or like, I mean, or I would rather house them in the American carceral structure to ensure that they are actually serving, like to ensure that they're just served. Here's a good debate tactic.
That's actually a great argument. I think it's a great point.
Ask Republicans every time they say, "Oh, I want undocumented migrants that have caused crimes to be deported." Ask them, why do you want rapists to roam free if they did a rape? Why do you not? Let's say an undocumented migrant is like done a heinous.
Cooking with that one. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, why have I never thought of that?
Ask them why you haven't thought about that either. You don't want punishment. You don't want crimes to be punished.
When you deport someone for committing a violent crime, if you're going to deport someone to a country, that is very difficult to do without the other country on the other end being like acknowledging that they're going to get you into their country, which means they know they've got a violent criminal coming to their country. How often does this, if you send a rapist back to Mexico or whatever, is the Mexican government just going to be like, oh, well, can't do anything about that, even though we know why you've been deported to us, so like why you're back here? No, they would just get jailed over there, wouldn't they? Okay.
Weird. So that's a nice little debate tactic there. But it is something that I also believe. I want amnesty for all undocumented immigrants that are living on U.S. soil right now, as long as they have not committed like any sort of heinous violent crime. But even when we entertain the notion that like we're deporting violent criminals or the Trump administration is like going after violent criminals, I think you guys all know that that's not the case.
No,
it's not like the previous administration was like, oh, are you Guatemalan and you did a rape? Okay, sorry, we can't arrest you. Like, that's so stupid. Like, no, of course, being arrested and being prosecuted, right? So that notion is like that premise that they operate off of is like a faulty hidden premise. The idea that like the Biden administration was not adequately targeting people that have done crimes regardless of their immigration status, and that's precisely the reason why I believe it was the Associated Press that came out with initial reporting that the majority of the undocumented migrants that have been deported so far, some of which aren't even undocumented, by the way, they are deporting documented non-citizens and undocumented non-citizens, and the majority of them had not committed any crimes, and a big chunk of those who had actually done crimes had done like trespassing, you know what I mean, or obstructing justice, like ridiculous.
In the UK, it's like we do one or the other. We either repatriate them, which is kind of like extraditing, like they would get criminally processed in their home country, or you let them serve their sentence in the UK and then you deport them. Okay.
Erroneous claims that normally would be thrown out under any other circumstance. And
I was under the impression the majority of individuals that they deported so far were individuals that have been documented as committing a crime or violent crime. But the reason why that's the case is not because they wanted to only or focus on the deportation of undocumented migrants who have committed crimes, but rather those were just the easiest undocumented migrants.
Oh, are you talking about the ones that are in the prisons already? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and like the misconstruction from Trump supporters, creating a narrative that because for the first week 800 out of 1,000 deportations were from individuals who were already in the prison system. You know what I mean?
They deported people that were already in the prison system, and that's why they like Tom Homan is talking about setting up a facility inside of Rikers in New York because they want to just like quickly, expeditiously deport any undocumented migrant that's done a crime. I still think it's ridiculous to do that. I think it's better to serve justice rather than just like give people a free trip back home.
I think I agree with that.
Yeah, where they're free. I totally agree with that. Yeah, you're totally right when it comes to that. So it's totally, they would have to justify that the deportations.
You can't be punished for a crime outside of their jurisdiction. Do you not know that? Are you joking? Are you kidding? Like if a Mexican citizen illegally goes to America, commits a rape, and then gets extradited, of course they can be prosecuted in Mexico. What the okay.
Wouldn't have freed people right into other places around the world because seemingly they would care about those places. Yeah. I mean, they would probably say some crazy, but they don't give a in most circumstances if you had someone who's not going to
Republicans are insane. But the other secondary problem with the deportation of criminals is mass destabilization in the country that you're sending them back to, especially if you look at MS-13. If you look at the history of El Salvador, MS-13 is an is an El Salvadoran gang that was born out of undocumented migrants from El Salvador having to resort to gang violence and criminal activity in an effort to make ends meet. And then they got incredibly radicalized in the, California.
The way I'm reading about it now, just on the other screen, is like it seems it's more often that they would jail you in the country where you committed the crime, and then once you've served your sentence, they would deport you. But as far as being extradited, then yeah, it does seem like you can serve your time in a different country, in your home country, especially if you're in the other country illegally. But I guess that would probably depend on the level of cooperation between the two countries, because it would be like a country deciding their criminal justice response based on evidence that's provided to them in a different country.
A prison structure, and then the American government sent them back to El Salvador without telling the El Salvadoran government that they were criminals. And lo and behold, they now
It wouldn't be extradited. Yeah, I'm using the wrong word there. Whoops.
a network where they could engage in international crime back and forth with the United States of America and basically overtook the government. I'm being a little reductive in the way that I'm explaining the story, but that's the secondary problem of just like mass releasing criminals. Not saying that like the 800 people that they deported initially were all like MS-13 style criminals or whatever, but ultimately there's also that additional issue as well when you engage in mass deportations of criminals too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we would disagree on immigration. Then I think a lot of our disagreements would probably be like on our liberal views. Like, are you like a socialist that like prioritizes?
Oh, he's going to soften every disagreement because yeah, okay. I think he's going to, yeah. This is his catch them while they're young strategy. Okay. Econ, let's go.
Or like state or like command control.
Well, I have a cooperative, but on top of that, no, I do believe in state control. I mean, I think
remember he has state control, yeah, because he's argued for the People's Republic of Walmart, which would mean like retail, and People's Republic of Walmart technically is the argument for the entire economy to be centrally planned, like a national economy. But...
already have,
or like state or like command control.
Well, I have a cooperative, but on top of that, no, I do believe in state control. I mean, I think we already have state control in general in America as well. It's just that the incentive structure revolves around subsidies to mega corporations, and instead of the state executing any sort of centralized planning with like a multiple decade policy in mind, we're just kind of operating on quarterly returns. Like we're just trying to maximize corporate profit. So there is still a level of state control. There's no true libertarian enterprise in this country.
State subsidies and regulations is not state control. State control is where the government owns the businesses and they direct the resources generally of an entire country. So the people who control how much steel gets produced for whichever thing also controls like the businesses that use that steel to produce products. Like that's not what we have. That's not state control. That's like saying, oh yeah, we already live in a central command state economy because people pay taxes. It's so stupid. That's not a command economy.
Or in any country, really. Of course, there has to be state control to a certain degree in order to maintain prices, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that there isn't like
It's such a non sequitur. No one's saying that we live in a... Okay.
No state control, but like, are you arguing that like the predominant factor of the economy would be the state control or like the cooperative control? Like, are you like someone who would believe that there should be some cooperatives based on markets, or just eradicate markets entirely?
I like cooperatives, and I think that there is a middle ground with like some market solutions, while still making sure that the state has the public best interest in mind in terms of creating commodities.
Okay, and then here's my question: is would you then like mandate there either as cooperatives or it's state control? Like if you had the ability to control that?
If I had the ability to control it, would I mandate every single corporation, every single corporate structure to be a cooperative structure?
Or like it would be state controlled, like nationalized?
I think that the government should provide, at least in the interim, the government should provide basic necessities like shelter and become a market competitor, which would be unfair for the market, certainly, with the sole purpose of eventually eradicating certain necessary commodities from the private structure. You can have personal property all day, every day, of course, and even luxury.
Dodging the question. We're not talking about the interim. It's like, what do you want in the end? Because before this was like the idea that you couldn't even, before it was like you couldn't even run, when you were talking to Ethan, it was like you couldn't even run as a pro-capitalist political party in a socialist society. He said you need re-education, whatever that means, I can guess. Is this his second time lucky? Is that what this is?
Luxury goods or whatever kind of accommodations that you desire. But ultimately, it's more so rent seeking that I'm against. It's more so private property that I think is not good and creates is at the heart of all of this inequality. But this is stuff that's never going to happen in my lifetime.
Why is he? Oh God, the bombardment. Is one of these people not actually educated in economics? The fact that he's just throwing all these words out like it's actually the problem is rent seeking and private industry. Like not all private industry is considered rent seeking. Usually in economics, rent seeking is the idea that you just kind of sit on some kind of asset and you just let it make you money without you doing anything. That would be rent seeking. Or I guess some people also put it down to like manipulation, like the way people with interest rates in the LIBOR scandal, maybe? Okay.
I don't know, private property that I think is not good and creates is at the heart of all of this inequality. But this is stuff that's never going to happen in my lifetime, I don't think. I'm simply trying to move in the direction, at least in the short term, in the direction of modest reforms that genuinely improve people's lives.
So then my thoughts are that, like, it sounds like your goals are you want to achieve this in the future, but your thoughts are that you were not even close or even at that point at all entirely. So pragmatically, you're just going to end up being like a social democrat.
Wait. I need to listen carefully to what he's doing here. Okay.
Is not good and creates is at the heart of all of this inequality. But this is stuff that's never going to happen in my lifetime, I don't think. I'm simply trying to move.
Wait, why not? Is that happening in your lifetime? I thought in a few years, decades happen. Do you know what that reminds me? It's funny that he's like this soft with these guys. There's one clip I found of Hasan that I don't think I've ever actually seen anyone else use. I don't think I ever saw it on any of the Reddits or anything. I found this one myself. Very impressive, I know. Where was it? Oh, I think I just called it. I can't remember what I called the obsidian thing. Oh, this. This?
What you think is the best realistic outcome for this conflict right now?
Oh my God, context.
To Israel to do it. Dearborn, huh? Interesting coincidence. Why was he hanging out with Hezbollah terrorists? A lot of Americans with Israeli flags in the bios are celebrating this for some reason. From Dearborn. Okay. Can I ask what you think is the best realistic outcome for this conflict right now? The Israeli economy and Israeli society collapses in and of itself, and that it goes the way of apartheid South Africa.
I love this. Moody's downgrades them a year into a war. They're going to collapse.
Society collapses in and of itself, and that it goes the way of apartheid South Africa, and the apartheid is abolished in its entirety. That is probably what will inevitably happen. There is no way. The contradictions are far too obvious, and this entire process will crumble. It will. The issue is the final stages of it will always be the deadliest. And we're experiencing it right now. How many decades? No, not decades. Not decades at all.
Well,
What? It's funny. He said this in like October 5th. Look at where like Assad's gone. The Axis is. The Houthis are posing like a much less of a threat now. They're rolling tanks into the West Bank, clearing out all of these refugee camps, which is where a lot of the militant strongholds are in there. Gaza is completely. They can't get arms imported from the Philadelphia corridor, like from Egypt anymore. Hezbollah are. They can't get arms from Syria anymore, and they've got the government in there that they didn't want. They've got a president of Lebanon that they didn't want, and a prime minister that they didn't want. Yeah, it's funny how his levels of optimism and like radical expectation of what happens in the world is so fluid based on who he's talking to.
Of this inequality, but this is stuff that's never going to happen in my lifetime. I don't think. I'm simply trying to move in the.
I thought we were at late stage capitalism. Isn't that what these guys always talk about? These Leninists and like late stage capitalism. Even though I mean, technically we've been at late stage capitalism since 1929 or whenever it was first coined. But surely it's like extra late stage capitalism now, like really late this time. I promise stage capitalism.
Direction, at least in the short term, in the direction of modest reforms that genuinely improve people's lives.
So then my thoughts are that, like, it sounds like your goals are you want to achieve this in the future, but your thoughts are that you were not even close or even at that point at all entirely. So pragmatically, you're just going to end up being like a social democrat.
The way, I mean, yeah, what I advocate for, my most radical perspectives don't come from.
Yeah, sure, bro. Well, I'll be whatever you want me to be, guys, for the time being. What?
Domestic policy. It's usually my anti-imperialist positions that cause a lot of ire in, especially in the minds of a lot of Americans.
Your anti-imperialist positions, except in the fact that you support the Russian annexation of Crimea, the Hanification and Chinese annexation of Tibet, the Chinese encroachment on Taiwan, the 9-dash line probably, and that activity, like. But apart from, Iranian imperialism, especially in Lebanon and Yemen. But apart from that, you're definitely anti-imperialist. Yeah. Also, he's just lying to them now. You realize he's manipulating them because Hasan's position on social democracy is actually that social democracy is not really that good. Social democracy is inevitably, right? Social democracy is something that these guys see as the thing that rescued capitalism. Okay, that's what they say about the New Deal and FDR and everything. Social democracy is supposed to be this thing that is a stepping and people who advocate for it, who are communists, would advocate for it only in the sense that it's a stepping stone to give people the education and the breathing space that they need to start thinking about more radical options so that more people become middle class and more people become the kind of like familial subsidized morons who are in his community who have all the free time in the world to go on Reddit and try to agitate and spread propaganda across normie communities so they can spread the revolution eventually. But that's what, these guys think social democracy is doomed. Yeah. Social democracy briefly rescues capitalism, but the internal motives, the engine of capital and the motive to fundamentally go back to reducing wages and increasing profits is always there. That's why you had social democracy of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and then you have what? Thatcher, Reagan. It gets rolled back, and it was always going to roll back because if you want to keep the profit motive alive, you can only improve living conditions for so long before capitalists get bored, get frustrated, go on strike, withhold their investment, and then force people to go unemployed, and then that unemployment reduces the bargaining power of workers so that they have to come back into the workforce for less wages, and they get disciplined by governments with anti-union laws and everything else, and then you go back to like what neoliberalism, what you have now. That's how they would normally characterize it. So it's weird that he would say that for the rest of his lifetime he's pragmatically a social democrat. That doesn't make any sense at all. Did I explain that too quickly? Interestingly, this whole analysis boils down to basically the blurb of Capital Volume 2. If you want it from Karl Marx, this book is so boring. Never read it. If wages rise, the capitalists will increase the prices of their commodities. This is basically like the Marxist, the orthodox Marxist, Leninist, crude understanding of social democracy. That's basically how they summarize it. Social democracy will get you some perks for a little while, but as long as the cancer of capital is still in play, then they will always work to and ultimately successfully roll it back. That's why these guys always like sort of commiserate over the days when we had 96% tax rates and unions and all this shit, and now it's all gone because the root of the problem, capitalism, was never addressed. You know, it was just kind of bandaged.
But yeah, as far as domestic policy goes, yeah, I mean, I'm an advocate for nationalized healthcare structure. I'm an advocate for socialized medicine in general, public housing in general. But these are, I would say, relatively modest reforms
Hello, aristocracy. How's it going? Nice to see you.
that exist in one way, shape, or form in other social democracies in Europe, even though they are running into the same problems with the parasitic nature of capital in terms of social democracies basically clawing back all of these social safety nets year over year with austerity measures, with the inevitable goal is privatization, and that is part of the reason why I think that I'm, I guess, a little bit more radical in the long term with what I believe. But yes, in the short term, I advocate mostly for modest social democratic proposals.
So it's short term, but it's also not going to go beyond that in your lifetime. What the f is he saying? My mic is too low. I'm so sorry. Is it fine now? It feels like it's still in the red. It's still in the red. It's still in the red. Do you know the first time I saw someone employ this tactic was this person? It was this
Hi, are you a fan of
person who I believe is now like a completely Alex Jones InfoWars tier.
Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, I am.
What do you like about him?
That he's a socialist.
Why is socialism good?
Are you like, I don't really want to do this. What is this for?
We're asking people why they like Bernie Sanders.
For InfoWars. I like what he stands for.
Exactly what values.
Eating the rich.
Eating the
So
rich.
it's like socialism eating the rich, but I believe at the end,
For socialism into this country.
Yeah.
Do you think that we would benefit?
Yeah.
But I just told you Venezuela's eating rats.
But I just want people to have health care, honey. I don't want
Well,
it's just there's why do they do this? It's such a what I want to know is how do they all do it at the same time without any apparent coordination? How do they all do this? Yeah, socialism, eat the rich, revolution, and you're like, wait, but like, isn't that kind of what about X, Y, and Z problem and historical issues? And they're like, what? I just want national health care, bro. Shut the f up. That's not socialism. Stop doing. That's not what you. Why do they do that? Why?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I mean, it practically in terms of domestic policy sounds like we're like practically on like the same side, and whatnot. Obviously, like that's why like we pretty much agree in terms of all like the policies and the people that we support and stuff. But I feel like a lot of leftists get really focused on like everyone agreeing on like
Hasan's just taking them for a ride, isn't he? Taking them for a little ride.
Those like sort of, I don't want to call them fringe economically related issues, but they're like, it's really like definitions and stuff. It's not like we don't pragmatically disagree. We get really focused on like, oh, we have that type of disagreement when we're in reality arguing, at least in the time period, for the same thing.
Well, the reasons for why I advocate for these things might be a little different than yours, aside from like genuinely improving people's lives. And this is another thing that I'm not like secretive about, but I see a noticeable lack of class consciousness in the American working class in general. there is tremendous class consciousness for capital owners, whether they even recognize it or not, and they don't even need to have class consciousness because the system is structured to benefit their needs regardless, and to continue their position as generating engaging in capital accumulation. The entire system is designed in that way, but the reasons as to why I think it's important to be able to do this is because I want labor unions and labor militancy to at least exist in this country, so that there is a valid mechanism of pushback against politicians on the Republican side of the spectrum, certainly, but even on the Democratic side as well. Because I think without, there's never been a moment throughout American history or history at all where concessions were given to the working class, whether it be the weekends or whether it be paid leave or any of those things, or the abolition of child labor, without real labor militancy. That has simply never happened. And the same.
That's mostly true. Mostly. You could argue Henry Ford and the $5 8-hour day. You could also argue that I think Industrial Revolution, before unions, Industrial Revolution Britain, before unions, and actually Marx writes about this in Das Kapital, before the labor movement, the people who were working to improve people's working conditions and to introduce laws against excessive and deadly labor practices, before labor unions, it was Christians. It was a combination of Christians and government employees. It was like the factory inspectors. If you look at some of the stuff Marx writes about in Capital, and it's all pretty well sourced, is just how brutal the inspectors were of people's workplaces near the sort of mid to late 19th century. Yeah. Those guys worked really, really hard to pull people into line and to hold people accountable for labor practices that were resulting in kids getting their fingers chopped off by the spinning machines and shit like that. Yeah. And also the bread that was full of alum and shit. Yeah. I think if you're talking 20th century, it's generally the case that I think labor action is where a lot of the progress is owed. Just a little bit of nuance, though. The thing with Christians was at the time was that they saw a lot of the effects of the Industrial Revolution as separating people from God, because what they saw was peasants and people who could sort of scrape a living off of the land and paid whatever to their landowner still had time for church and everything like that. But when it came to the Industrial Revolution, what they saw was these kind of they saw a lot of farmers, peasants, and people like that moving into cities and then working 14, 15, 16 hours in these factories, often even in the dark. And then all they could do when they came out was go to the gin shops or go and drink beer, right? And the gin shops in particular was just very, very, very bad alcohol that massively reduced people's life expectancies. So one of the things that recovered the British life expectancy during the Industrial Revolution, before unions and working conditions, things like that, it was Christians who got the gin shops shut down. Christians who managed to close the gin shops succeeded in actually recuperating some of the life expectancy as it was going down during the Industrial Revolution. And also education as well, because in a lot of these public education systems, the teachers were just it was terrible. They were illiterate. There were teachers who couldn't even write down their own names. So these volunteers, these Christian volunteers, would open these schools where they would teach kids in their local community how to read. There's one famous story about this lady. Her name was Hannah More. I think this is her. She was this conservative philanthropist, Christian, and her whole thing was teaching kids how to read. And because she was so devout, she actually tried to manage her education programs so that people could learn how to read but not to write. She wanted them to be able to read all the literature that she gave them, but she didn't want them to write down their own ideas. But obviously, if you teach someone how to read, they're going to figure out how to write. So she kind of fucked up there. But yeah, most of that, actually, that particular story I learned from university. But most of that stuff about the Industrial Revolution, you learn from reading Marx, though, among other people. It's the most Lutheran thing. Yeah.
Same goes for social struggles as well. Same goes for civil rights. Militancy is an absolute necessity. And I see the American working class as completely removed from that conversation, where they just understandably see themselves as powerless in this structure. And I think that breeds resentment, hostility, and it creates paired up with the economic volatility that many Americans experience, that creates a perfect ground for right-wing reactionary fascist movements to grow, and that's what we're seeing in America.
I think I agree with that. So I'm not as educated on economics as Parker is, but what I will say is seemingly that's compatible with like a social democrat model to like advocate for more class consciousness. To like,
you know what? These two kids, I like them. I like Parker and Dean. Fuck them though, like because they're doing the same thing. They're doing this thing where they're like, yeah, that thing, everything you just said there about how like social democracy is unsustainable. It's only short term, and we need more militancy and all that. Like, you're basically like us. Yeah, you're basically a social democrat like us. You know, you basically just want to do some like soft reform, and then kind of just maintain that against the backlash attempts. And why are you doing that? Why are you reinventing him in your head for him?
You know, get more social reform, better programs for individuals and like the low middle class, and create economic policy in which centers the average citizen or constituent of a country compared to those who have the most money. But I will say, maybe the more we advocate for class consciousness, the more I educate myself on, like this paradigm of conflicts between, classes of wealth and how to effectively resolve them. Maybe that just naturally leads you down this pathway of becoming just completely radicalized socialists,
But I don't think I joke and I say like, yeah, I have radical beliefs, but like, I mean, what's the saying?
I'm sorry, that was a play on words. I was joking too.
No. It's by no measure of mental wellness to be well adjusted to a completely insane society. Like, think about it that way, where advocacy for socialized medicine is seen as a bridge too far for many Americans who are so heavily propagandized, no matter how brilliant they fancy themselves to be. The independent thinkers who think that like social medicine means like, oh, we're going to do Venezuela style rat eating in America or whatever the right? So like,
bro, you support the Russian annexation of Crimea. You're quite weird. I don't know what to say.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's radicalization, more so an evolution by recognizing the understandable contradictions that are.
You think that the little Hamas, you fell for the Hamas propaganda jobs of like convincing you that the hostages actually had a good time in captivity. Like, you're kind of mental. You're kind of a nutcase. Yeah. Not only did you support the Houthis kidnapping people in the Red Sea, civilians, Filipino civilians, all people, you actually lied on behalf of them. You told them that it was international water. You told them it was territorial sovereign water, but it wasn't. It was international. You propagandized on their behalf. They did it for free. You said you don't have an issue with Hezbollah. Those guys are nuts. Yeah. Yeah, you're pretty mental.
Baked into capitalism. Because capitalism was an advancement from the previous mode of commodity production, for sure. But most of even what Marx talks about in terms of capitalism is not necessarily, attacking capitalism at all, but instead simply describing capitalism with dialectics, like through the assessment of, and you might think it's a little bit reductive at this point, but like through an assessment of like capital accumulators, capital owning, the capital owners, the bourgeoisie, and the workers that are wage laborers in general, the proletariat. So that's just it's more so a description of how things are, and not necessarily like moralizing a certain position that like workers are always good, or
it's such a oh god, he's not wrong, but it's like, but just also Marx for doing this as well. There is this whole thing about Marx's analysis of capitalism not being about moralizing about good and evil. It is a critique. It's not just a description. It is a critique. But it's funny how they'll say that this isn't about moralizing. This isn't about moralizing the people involved. This is about critiquing the systems that drive this behavior and reward bad behavior and punish good behavior, like that kind of thing. It's not really about a moral analysis. Meanwhile, like all the and then the writing is just the most moralizing, like Christian level sanctimony you'll ever see in literature. And the same with Hasan as well. Like, this guy moralizes all the time. He moralizes all the time, asking people about how much humanity they have in their souls and like the greed and everything. Like he sounds like a preacher. But yeah, Marx did that as well. It's not moralizing. It's all just analysis, bro. Let the capitalists crumble. Let their red, greed-infested blood soak the streets as they crumble at the fear of the wrath of the proletariat. Like, okay.
They always do the right things or anything like that. There's no good bad dynamics there at all. And instead, it's just about describing how capital is accumulated.
Dean just got hit with a.
I'm having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, hit with technical.
Got hit with a meteor, dude.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts
I don't
on.
understand how glorious Xi Jinping's application TikTok would do this right as I'm talking about abolishing the commodity form.
Oh, he's gone. He's getting banned.
Yeah, I guess where I'm coming from, and I'm coming from someone who.
Hey, Egyptor, I'm just going to tell you one thing before I ban you. If any country commits war crimes, that doesn't give you the right to kidnap civilians from another country. You can't do it. Sorry. Russia's committing war crimes. I'm not going to go to Belarus and kidnap some random sailors. Okay, I'm not going to. It's not even Belarus, like that's because that's a military ally of Russia. It's more like who's neutral. I don't even know. Am I going to go to Uzbekistan and just kidnap some random cunts because Russia's committing war crimes? Go away. Dumb.
Who used to be a socialist
Sweden.
myself for a pretty long time, and I actually started my whole content creation like creating like leftist
Belarus is landlocked. There are lots of landlocked countries that have navies. I've looked this up, okay?
and socialist content. Is that like a lot of these issues that exist, I think, can be solved with social democracy. And a lot of people say that there's like issues with social democracy. It starts to corrupt. People start to fight and advocate against it. But I don't think that's a critique against social democracy in of itself. I think that just means that you just need to maintain social democracy in the same type of way like we maintain our democracy.
Well, man, like that's social democracy hasn't been tried.
Well, I mean, like we could say that like we don't think that this real
Hasan massively disagrees with that. The idea that you maintain social democracy the way you'd maintain a democracy. Hasan hates that. That's liberal. That's disgusting to him. What are you talking about? Come on.
In the same type of way like we maintain our democracy.
Well, man, like that's social democracy hasn't been tried.
Well, I mean, like we could say that like we don't think that this real certain form has been tried, and I think that that's cool. But like my argument would then be is that we'd have to try it on smaller levels to be able to see whether or not it works on a larger form in order to be able to say that like it's actually effective. I don't think we'd be able to say that we should adopt it on some sort of globalized production model if it is the case that we don't have any type of level of actual probabilistic means of demonstrating how likely it is that it's going to be beneficial for workers or for people. Because we could actually like hurt some of our concerns like, oh, quality of life for workers if we don't take that into account when we're like applying these sorts of systems, if we don't know what the empirical effect is of these different types of theoretical models. Not to say that theoretical models can't be.
No, there's donos, the roses, these are emotes. I also remember thinking that the rose was a social democracy or as a symbol of social democracy, but then I saw Mike from PA's chat spamming it at me once when he raided me all those years ago. So is it actually a tanky thing now? It's been co-opted?
Then used or seen to be effective later on, but it's like we just need evidence to indicate that these particular models are effective before we establish it on such a pragmatic basis worldwide, is what I would say.
Yeah, I mean we're not getting there anytime soon anyway. I'm not saying like tomorrow with a magic wand we are going to dissolve the class structure and live in a moneyless, classless, stateless society. You know.
Yeah, my thoughts even then, like, would even a stateless society be like desirable in the future? Like, even if we hit like full automation. So I don't want to like full on socialist debate you, but like, even if we hit full automation, like, would it even be desirable for us to get rid of that? Like, because we still want a state to like limit people from committing crimes, right?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I'm not a communist, so I think that like I can't even imagine what that would look like in general. But the way I explain it is like I'm not opposed to it, you know.
Are you kidding me? I guess he's not. He's more just like an Islamic fundamentalist now. But wait, what? Didn't he do this whole thing about Ethan saying like, "Oh, Ethan, you're such a child. Like, why did you not know I was a communist?"
So I think that like I can't even imagine what that would look like in general. But the way I explain it is like I'm not opposed to it, you know.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I'm a communist, but I wouldn't say that I'm opposed to a
stateless, moneyless society, a borderless society.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's just completely
Would you be
equivocating,
against like
okay.
the enforcement of certain types of laws? Like once we meet that society, like I feel like in a communist society, there's no government that would enforce laws against like pedophilia. I feel like that would be true, right?
No, yes, obviously. I'm that's why I'm saying I'm not a communist, but if society evolved in a way where we're talking so far out there, like we're now talking about theoretically what it would look like, right? We're basically fantasizing about a world that is from where I'm standing impossible to imagine. But I think like the argument, I guess, would be that one, obviously most crime in general, with the exception of like antisocial personality disorder related
It would
crimes,
disappear in a socialist society, obviously. Yeah.
are like psychopathy or sociopathy, like things like that, crimes born out of crimes that might be born out of like mental problems. And not to say that like people with mental health issues are criminals or whatever. I'm not saying that at all. But with the exception of those, like most crime is done because of financial circumstances, like your material conditions create a likelihood for you to go out and do crime. And I think the argument there is that like in that structure, it's already all of your needs are addressed anyway. So the only remaining crime would possibly be, like you said, pedophilia, which I guess at that stage, medical advancements would have found a solution for that as well. Like I'm assuming that's what it would look like if I were to envision a communist society. So the concept of crime in and of itself would be entirely destroyed, considering that the overwhelming majority of crime is born out of material conditions.
I mean, you can also just appeal to some.
Is that even true though? Like, I know inequality correlates quite a lot with crime, but there are quite a lot of countries that you don't really get much of a connection between like. There are lots of countries that bounce outside of that rule where you expect like a really poor country, the poorer the country, like the more crime and shit like that. Because Ghana was one example in Africa where in terms of compared to the rest of the continent, Ghana is one of the poorer countries in Africa, but it's also one of the safer ones. Like, you got a very weird interaction there. This whole idea that like, this is the base superstructure argument though. This is what he's making. He's making this argument, which again is ironically a very communist argument, like a Marxist, the kind of argument you'd expect a communist to make, is the idea that all these different spheres of society, whether it's media, culture, like religion, ideology, and all that, it's all downstream from the relations of production. It's all downstream from the economy. So people might say, why is culture so fast? Why is fast fashion a thing? Why does everything go out of date really quickly in terms of trends? Well, it's because people need to make profits. So profits are at their best when things go out of fashion. So people need to buy new clothes. Like, that's a really simple, straightforward. Why is media like low effort? So it's because that's like what sells better. It's like the least work for the most money. So people will say that that's where you get class reduction. That's where you get class reductionism from as well. Like if you don't solve racism without solving class. Yeah, that kind of thing. But these guys kind of act like the economic drives and economic relations are what fundamentally like pushes everything else. Like there's not really interplay there. It's like one forces the other, which is kind of silly. I don't even think Marx agreed with it, because why the fuck would he bother with any political activism if you think everything is just driven by the underlying capitalist, like the underlying economic forces? Why would you try to inspire activists? It doesn't make any sense. Anyway.
Libertarian enforcement mechanism, right? Don't forget those. Don't forget those collectives, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a libertarian by any means. So, and that's part. Like, I'm a state enjoyer. I often, especially in this past month, I've been talking quite a bit about how we should have 1 million more government employees. I think it's ridiculous that we're trying to cut government employees rather than hire more people for the government. I think that's
the interesting thing about that base superstructure is that Marx didn't really seem to endorse it all that much. It's from I think it's from a piece that I don't believe he ever published himself. I think it was published posthumously. This is basically where he's outlining it. It's from the beginning of a book that that wasn't even very good. It was supposed to be a contribution to his like critique of political economy. The critique of political economy was capital. It was supposed to be 6 volumes. There are only 3. 2 of them are a total mess. This is supposed to be like a side text to it, but yeah, he writes this bit here that people teach you in sociology and social science and other humanities as the base superstructure. But I don't really think he ever pushed it that hard himself outside of this. But he basically says, in the social production of their existence, men inevitably enter into definite relations which are independent of their will, namely relations of production appropriate to a given stage in the development of their material forces of production. The totality of these relations of production constitutes the economic structure of society, the real foundation on which arises a legal and political superstructure and to which correspond definite forms of social consciousness. So, if you want to just show that as a drawing, he's basically saying that, and I hate this drawing. It's so stupid. It's so dense. He's basically saying that the way society is structured is you have an economic base, okay? Which in this case would be, fuck off, man. Okay. You've got your economic base, which determines how everything else will be structured as well. So like you'll have politics, you'll have law, and all of this stuff is basically built to facilitate this, right? And then on top of that, you would have like culture. But the way that he's explaining it here and the way that really dogmatic Marxists, and Stalin was one of these people, is they just think that history is basically, it's all predetermined in a way, because everything that happens was always going to happen because of the economic forces. So when they talk about revolution, they say that capitalism is going to result in bosses wanting to make as much money as possible. The way they're going to do that is they're going to get rid of all of the old kind of like feudal independent life and get rid of all the artisans and the small businesses and standardize everything and standardize all the people so that people are basically working for the lowest amount of possible training and education, so that they're just robots doing one task performed to the maximum ability. So they're just squeezing as much profit out of everyone as possible. And what that inevitably does is that you end up drawing people into tighter and tighter areas like cities and factories so that they're all in one place, they're all getting exploited. But the problem is that you have also produced a whole bunch of workers who are going to get very angry and very alienated from their natural and primal like state of being, that they're going to be looking around and being like, whoa, this is horrible. What are we all doing here? This, like, that boss is making all that money and they live in that building next to here. Meanwhile, we're like working for scraps. Well, while we're all in one place, let's unionize and let's fight back. And then these guys will overthrow the capitalist system. That's why they always thought it was inevitable. It's not like you really need to, like it's all inevitable. That's why people like Lenin and Stalin is like, they just thought like, socialism, it's starting here, it's going to spread elsewhere. Like it's always going to happen. And at times, this is why, because they seem to discount the idea that culture and ideology can actually supersede this and that you can actually have this turned on its head, didn't really faze them. And a really good example of this and how this ideology basically is that when Stalin is getting warned that the Nazis are building up military presence at the border in World War II and that they might be willing to attack, Stalin, with the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact still in place, thinks, okay, well, they're driven by, the Nazis are capitalists. They're capitalist dogs like everyone else. So let's just give them more, right? Let's just give them more iron and more manganese and more coal or whatever, or more oil. And then they did. They increased all their shipments to the German war machine because they really just thought that more resources for Germany would appease them, because this is what they actually wanted. They were just trying to like goad them into giving them more. He did not believe that the Nazi ideology and the lust for Lebensraum, like for living space, would have dominated their practical desires. So he just ignores the warnings, to the point to on the last day or on the day before the invasion, he shoots a German deserter for telling him that the Nazis are ready to invade, because he was that much of a hardline materialist, because it didn't make material sense for the Nazis to invade the Soviet Union at that point, obviously. So he couldn't comprehend that as a thought until it happened. Anyway, That's what that means. The mode of production of material life conditions the general process of social, political, and intellectual life. It is not the consciousness of men that determines their existence, but their social existence that determines their consciousness. At a certain stage of development, the material productive forces of society come into conflict with the existing relations of production, or this merely expresses the same thing in legal terms, with the property relations within the framework of which they have operated hitherto. From forms of development to the productive forces, these relations turn into their fetters. Then begins an era of social revolution. The changes in the economic foundation lead sooner or later to the transformation of the whole immense superstructure. So in a sense, like, people don't really have agency in this world. But again, I just don't really believe Marx ever genuinely thought this way, because why would he try to inspire political action for his entire life if that's what he believed? So, just my thought. Coming back to Hasan, Jesus. Do you think they could maybe ask him if he wants to abolish capitalism? Probably the main question. Do you want to abolish private property and free markets and capitalism? You want it all gone? And would you use a level of force to do it? Because in his head, the answer is yes, but it would be really funny to see how he navigates it with these guys.
That's one of the biggest problems in America, is that we don't have enough people doing jobs in general. Any area, like I'll give you the TSA as an example. I flew into Salt Lake City for the day to shoot a podcast with my co-host, who has escaped to Utah. Okay. And it was annoying. I was waiting in line, and I was waiting in line for an hour. Okay. It sucked. And back in the day, I used to be like, man, these guys, like, these guys suck at their jobs. They're just like sitting around twiddling their thumbs, not doing a good job. Now I'm woke. I realize that it's not because of the individual employee that's like handling this insane amount of demand. It's that somewhere along the line, someone decided that we're going to need to do budget cuts, and that we're not going to be able to open up the extra lines, right? Because we don't want to pay for the salaries of additional TSA employees at the time. Same with luggage handlers, right? Like anywhere where you experience, as a consumer, anywhere you experience any sort of issue, our immediate inclination is that it's actually the fault of the individual workers who are lazy, and that's wrong. That's just simply incorrect. It is directly because companies are corner cutting, cost cutting, and the most malleable aspect of commodity production always is going to be labor. So you cost cut by forcing 4 people to do the job of 8. Especially when you can get away with it, especially when conditions have deteriorated and you're fearful that you might lose your job and then lose your house, or, you know, not be able to pay rent anymore. The same principle holds for the federal government as well. TSA employees are already technically federal government employees anyway. That's why I use that as an example. Trump cut a bunch of TSA employees as well. I think it was like 300 or something. Really,
yeah, I like how it's ironic how MAGA says like these criminals are like taking our jobs, but really it's Donald Trump who's the criminal taking our jobs.
Yeah,
from federal employees. Kind of crazy that's embarking on it. I don't mean to like go into a whole socialism debate with you, but yeah, thanks for answering all my questions. Like, yeah, no, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no problem.
You know, Hasan, I got a question.
All right, let's hear it.
So, it's been funny. Okay. So, it's about every like 30 to 45 days, I'll check my Twitter DMs, and I'll see a new DM from you saying, "Pop out to LA and come on the show." And you know, and it's just been so funny because it's been happening for like 6 months, and at this point, I think it's hilarious. You know, I'm no.
I tell her, hit me up. But you were like, "Oh, I'll come to LA even just for that alone." I was like,
"Yeah,
well,
bro, I'll pop on just for that."
I felt like that was too much pressure. I don't want to. I don't know where you live, but that's like.
It's not. Don't worry. I live in LA, so he'll come out and see me too.
Yeah, I got a $65 flight one way to LA from my local airport.
Hell yeah! What do you guys think about Jubilee, Straight Arrow News? That's my biggest gripe with Jubilee.
Oh my god, I hate their fact checking so much. It's the worst ever. Also, like I think what they did with Michael Knowles here recently was pretty negligent.
Did you guys know
on their behalf?
Straight Arrow News that presents itself as an impartial news outlet, like a fact checker, is actually owned by a billionaire dude. I forget what his name is. Hold on, let me look this up real quick.
That's actually a crazy issue, man. I was literally on stream like bitching. I was like, I don't know if I'm tripping, but these fact checks are trash.
Are horrible.
Like,
I know, right?
I thought I was like being dumb. I was like,
So the fact checks are right leaning.
Bro, the fact,
totally are.
and
Okay,
they're always
them
like,
all.
they're always like
Fuck 'em
missing.
all.
They're always like missing.
Okay, whatever. That bit was good. Why not? So he's not a communist, and he really just believes that social democracy is an interim period, but he also thinks that it might probably stay that way, and there won't be a revolution until after he's dead. So, okay, sure, yeah, social democracy is just short term, but long enough that he doesn't really need to see what a revolution would look like to his spoiled rich ass. Like, because I keep saying this, guys, like Hasan is very incompetent and he's very stupid and he lives in he's very opulent, and a lot of communists don't like opulence. It's not like they're mutually exclusive. You can be an opulent communist. You can actually theoretically make quite a lot of money and still be proletariat, because it's about relations of production. It's about whether or not you own or whether or not you sell your labor for money. If you sell your labor for $1 million a month, like, you're a worker. Yeah, if you don't own the business, then you're proletariat in Hasan's world. But that doesn't mean communists don't also have a big issue with opulence, like they do. Hasan has criticized opulence in the past. So all I'm saying is that for a myriad of reasons, mostly because of all the nonsense that he comes out with, yeah, if there was ever a communist revolution, Hasan would be right there in the gulag next to me. We'd be sharing a cell, you know? So that's good. Maybe, yeah, I think in some part of his heart, he genuinely believes that he just wants to advocate for social democracy. And then after he's dead, all the crazy people in his audience can go and actually achieve the world that they want. Hasan, not a communist, got him. But also,
they cut the funnel from both.
You know, I perfectly understand that social democracies,
the things that have been programmed into them, and then you can start to build upon a basis of reality.
You're describing the reason why so many people simultaneously can, speaking power, any kind of fighting power, to strike at the heart of the imperial core where value is generated. I think that in the short term, in order to combat against that, you have to advocate for a much lighter form of propaganda. Despite, I perfectly understand that social democracies benefit tremendously from American imperialism, Western imperialism, and would not exist in the way that they do without such atrocities committed, right? But
I mean, really, but you're okay with that happening until you're dead? What? Where did that? Why didn't Dean Parker hear that part?
If you want America,
remember the communists that these guys commiserate over from the 20th century are the same people who called social democrats social fascists. That was their biggest enemies. The number one enemy of the communists, especially in the 30s in Germany, was not Nazis. It was social democrats.
Way that I feel about it, and if you want America to get out of the way for places with more revolutionary potential to do what they would normally do, I think that one thing you have to do is advocate for a lighter form, while simultaneously still doing agitated propaganda that goes beyond
right,
social democratic ideas.
I just wanted to put emphasis on the exact point of the so-called radicalization funnel, where, for example, Hasan and JT catch them while they're young, as they say, and then they start looking into this new idea, etc., and then move forwards through the funnel, get more and
I'm
more.
curious how Hasan responds to this, because even if Hasan's not a communist, does he realize that this guy is basically saying that you're just like a useful idiot for communists? All three of these people are Marxist, Leninist, 20th century, state-controlled everything, Stalinist communists. That's what these guys are. All three of them. And Hasan is catching people while they're young so they can eventually get funneled to these nutters.
More informed, get more and more radicalized, and so on, can only work and can absolutely utilize, for example, the stuff that Hasan does, because Hasan does one very particular.
I hope you stream more. Love listening while at work.
Oh, damn, thanks for the 20 Canadian, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Particular thing that social democrats that, for example, we would never call to this podcast, or we would give a lot of too, because they cut the funnel from both sides. What do I mean by this? They introduce people to lukewarm socialist ideas, etc., and then they want to keep them there.
Yeah.
Right? Well, whenever Hasan introduces people to socialist ideas, yes, the lukewarm, not so scary sounding ones, keeping your power levels low, hidden, and so on. He does not stop them from progressing through the funnel and getting additional information and so on. He
Not a
doesn't
communist, though.
agitate against, for example, the revolutionary perspective and so on and so on. That is the main difference. You do your part in the funnel for the cause or whatever the you want to call it. We'll talk later about if what we're doing actually does anything, etc. But as long as you do not try to keep people exactly there where you want them and don't want them to evolve, etc., then you're doing, in my modest opinion, a great thing for the cause. But unfortunately, there's a lot, especially for example on Twitch, that do the
what cause? What cause is Hasan doing a good job for? What? And of course, these guys are just going to tolerate Hasan saying that. We're social democracy and until after he's dead, basically. None of this is happening in his lifetime.
the opposite, and they just because they want to farm their audience as much as they can, and then they generate drama, which is almost 99% with other socialists, etc., and that is
I stay away from all that noise.
Exactly, and that is reactionary. That is quite literally anti-progressive and hurts the movement much more than it helps. So yeah, those are the two different.
I hate wreckers, right? I mean, they've always been around, and I think originally wreckers would operate.
Why does he say etc. so much? I don't know. These guys are pretty insane. Like their brains are kind of a bit mangled. So. Whatever. I don't really care about him saying etc. too often, so much as I care about him saying that he's catching people or he wants other people to catch the youth, catch them while they're young and susceptible, so we can send them down a rabbit hole of supporting some of the most authoritarian failures of the 20th century. Some of the biggest political, economic, military, ecological failures. Because that's what it was. That's what these guys cry over, the Soviet Union and Mao's China and shit like that. They were abject failures. And these guys complained that they didn't kill enough people. Why is Hakim so evil? That's not Hakim, that was Yugopnik speaking. Catch them while they're young. Bro, that is some nonce patter. Don't like it.